But one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is some of like the security vendors that are of a little bit less repute who are claiming attackers are using AI to make themselves more successful, right? Like everybody worry because the sky's falling down because now attackers have access to AI. The sad reality is that they do not need to use AI, right? They can just sell the phishing email with an Excel macro in it, compromise like a set of credentials, and like Bob's your uncle. And so like you don't need to use AI. And if there's one thing we know about like cyber attackers is that they will always take the path of least resistance. And that's down to the fact that like phishing is still so effective and easy and so on.
Welcome to Software Snack Bites. I'm your host, Shomik Ghosh of Bold Start Ventures, and today we're excited to have Eoin Hinchy on the pod. Eoin is founder and CEO of Tynes and was previously Senior Director of Security at Docusign. And in this episode, we're going to cover the, kind of the evolution of SOAR, which is, we'll get into what that is, building in security kind of to start, and then moving into adjacent areas or frankly, just new areas entirely for Tynes, and then how AI-driven workflows function, especially in this world where it seems like things are changing every day. So, Eoin, thanks for being on.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start off just from the beginning, I guess, like just high level, what does Tynes do?
Yeah, so think about Tynes as a platform to help you build, run, and monitor any important workflow. So our customers are doing things like automating, if they're in a security team, automating phishing response, automating the running down of EDR alerts, making sure that infrastructure is in compliance. IT teams use Tynes for employee onboarding and offboarding, access reviews, any repetitive mission critical workflow. Our customers use Tynes to build those workflows, run them at scale, and then monitor them in case they need human intervention or they go wrong.
Yeah, got it. And like, how'd you come up with the idea? Was it something you were thinking about at Docusign? Like, what was it something in the Irish water? What was going on?
maybe all of the above. No, so I'm a first time founder. I'm a first time entrepreneur. Honestly, never had any grand ambitions of like founding a company or building a business. I spent the vast majority of my career as a cybersecurity practitioner. So working in primarily technical roles like incident response, security operations, AppSec, full management, security engineering, those types of roles at companies like eBay, PayPal, and Docusign. And in 2017, I was running cybersecurity at Docusign and was responsible for pretty much everything that wasn't strictly compliance related. And had an amazing team. They all knew their jobs inside out, could respond to any type of incident, were motivated, well compensated. It was just a great place to work. But as that company was growing and as our tech stack was maturing and our ability to detect malicious behavior in our environments was improving, the amount of ops work on my team's plate was growing really quickly. And you'll be familiar with the kind of stuff like running down phishing emails or responding to alerts or doing threat hunting, those types of roles. And when we benchmarked it, we found that about 80% of my team's time was spent doing something they'd already done that day. Now, as a people manager, that's not what you want for your team, right? That's just like terrible, leads to human error, churn, lack of motivation, etc. And frankly, it's the reason we invented computers. So people wouldn't have to do this monotonous work over and over again. The challenge was that my team were incredible people, but they were security practitioners and not software engineers. And so they couldn't write the code to the level that we required to get themselves off that treadmill. Now, a bunch of them could have written a bit of like Python or a bash script here and there, but we didn't want what were literally the company's most mission critical processes hanging off these scripts that were fragmented, hard to manage, weren't secure, blah, blah, blah. And so in 2017, we carved out a bunch of budget and began to look for tools that we could buy off the shelf that would allow my team automate the repetitive parts of their job without having to write code. And we looked at about a dozen different platforms over the course of like 6 weeks, everything from big box shops like Cisco and Microsoft to the kind of independent SOAR products at the time, like the Misto and Phantom and Simplify, right through to consumer products like Zapier and If This Then That. Long story short, we hated everything that we looked at. They were either like way too hard to use, they couldn't handle the complexity or mission criticality of my team's workflows, or their pricing models were entirely punitive for the way we wanted to use the tool. And so out of frustration, I said, you know what, I think I can do a better job of this myself. And so, founded Tines with a North Star that was no more grandiose than building the product that I wished I'd had as a practitioner. And that's 7 years ago now, believe it or not. So I think we've surprised everybody that that a company founding like that could grow and blossom into the amazing business we have today.
So before we kind of dig into some of the more aspects of the product, but Ireland, we actually have two companies, shout out Artillery and Roadie over there. But I guess like when you were building in 2017 in Ireland, what was that like, especially with access to talent, meeting the customers that you wanted to meet? Like, how did all that work?
It's funny, we never thought about it, right? So I was based in Dublin, but I'd also lived in the Bay Area for a while as well. And I'd spent, 15 years working for Bay Area companies. And the vast majority of my managers were like based in the US, and I led teams that were based in the US. And so I had no kind of like doubt that we could build an amazing company from Ireland or from Dublin. I think the challenge, which you rightly point out, was where do we get access to our early customers to have conversations with? And I think that's the reason we don't see more companies founded in Ireland, because it's harder to establish product market fit when you can't just go visit your customer or like meet them in their time zone or whatever. We had the distinct advantage in that I was building the product for myself. And so I didn't need to go and like run every design decision or run hypotheses by a gang of early adopters. I was literally building the product to my own requirements and specifications. And, now as we have, many hundreds of customers, we're fortunate to have a team that's globally dispersed. And so we've got folks on the ground in all these areas that can work with customers, but we managed to kind of sidestep the initial challenging part around establishing the company in those early days.
So let's go into when you started, right? You're talking about this kind of workflow automation, security parlance, we call that SOAR, right? And so you were evaluating all those tools, trying to figure it out. You saw that none of them were solving the gap. But I guess there's so many people that have built in this, and security teams still complain constantly about how SOAR doesn't actually solve the problem. Like what is the discordance? What is happening?
Yeah, so I think it's a phenomenal question, by the way, because there's been so many companies that have started in this space, and kind of like no one has gotten anywhere close to where we are today. And I think the reason for that, Shomik, is pretty simple. One, these problems are deceptively hard. And so if you're an entrepreneur or a founder and you look at this market of like, oh man, security teams need a way to automate these dozen use cases, I'm just going to build a product that will allow them to do that and like watch the cash roll in. But unless you've actually been a security practitioner, it's really hard to understand that the way company A does phishing can be wildly different to how company B does phishing, can be wildly different to how company C does phishing. And so as a result, the companies, and I've great admiration for like Phantom and Demisto, but their founders were not security practitioners, right? And so they were building these products to solve for phishing and to solve for CrowdStrike alerts and to solve for SIM alerts. And it's really hard to do that because the product needs to be very generic to be able to handle all these varieties of different use cases, but also very specific to solve for the acute needs of security teams. That's the first challenge. I think the second challenge is that, SOAR, at least from my experience when I was a practitioner, SOAR was kind of pitched as this single pane of glass, this panacea and this silver bullet, right? Just put all your alerts in here, don't worry about it, and we'll figure out the rest. And we'll do the workflow, we'll do the threat intelligence, we'll do the case management, we'll do the analyst collaboration, and it'll be a single pane of glass. And security teams have been because our security teams have been sold a single pane of glass for like 25 years. And as one of our customers says, like all they get is a single glass of pain, right? It just doesn't work. These teams are so different. The use cases are so different. And I think what we did that was unique to Tines was we built a very general automation platform. And we didn't try to do the analyst collaboration. We didn't try to do the case management. We didn't try to do the threat intelligence. We just did this world-class workflow automation product initially. And we said, you've already got Jira. You've already got Recorded Future. You've already got Slack. What you need is workflow automation. And we're not going to try and sell you a single pane of glass or a silver bullet. And maybe we'll add some of these new SKUs as we get there. But the problem you have today is around workflow automation. And that's what we're going to solve for you.
You brought up phishing a number of times. Like in terms of like SOAR use cases, is that still where people are kind of bring it most, or is it stuff now where they're integrating it with like, the amount of ML that they can now do over the SIM? Like, are they starting to do more there? Like, let me put it this way. Has the use cases of SOAR shifted in terms of like percentages? If it was 50% phishing, is it now 20% or something like that?
I kind of have like two answers for that question. I think the first one is like SOAR is really hard to pin down nowadays. Like we've always had a love-hate relationship with the term SOAR because we've never really considered ourselves one. Even from the early days, we never really did. And I think the three most common SOAR use cases as a SOAR platform are almost identical to what they were 10 years ago. It's phishing, it's SIM alerts, and it's kind of like a distributed decision making. Like they're still the three primary SOAR use cases. And when we're working with customers and doing a replacement of like what we call a legacy SOAR provider, they're still mostly what the use cases entail. It's different varieties of them, but that's what we move over to Tynes initially. And then we layer on all the other use cases on top of that, like your cloud posture management, your DLP, your GitHub PR security reviews. All those use cases are then layered on top. What we are seeing more of is our customers, if they've got a greenfield site and they have no automation, they're just building out their program, they don't typically start with those use cases anymore because, frankly, Google will do a decent enough job of it nowadays. Microsoft Teams will do an okay job of detecting like spam and so on. And so if you're not that worried about phishing, or you've got a really strong 2FA posture set up, perhaps phishing isn't as high priority use case as it once was. And so now we're seeing people initially like focus on things like onboarding and offboarding, or user account reviews, kind of like those compliance use cases almost, or risk-based use cases. But the long tail of use cases that we see from our customers is frankly bananas, because again, it's all unique to their businesses.
Yeah, it maps to something that I've kind of seen is I think phishing clearly has not been solved. There's still phishing attacks, there's still social engineering attacks in multiple ways, but like credential compromise and permission seems to have become almost now the most common entryway. They're doing the phishing to try and get the access to that, and then boom, the world's their burrito. And I think like that might be kind of, it seems that's mapping to what you're seeing too, is just like the threat attack surface has almost shifted to more of that, permission, credential compromise, and access management.
Yeah, well, if you put yourself in the shoes of an attacker, what you're trying to get access is to valuable data, frankly, right? Yeah. And so the way that you like most often do that is by accessing some sort of data warehouse, whether it's a CRM or a SIM or a NetSuite or whatever. And the way you get to that is like by a set of credentials. And so if you're an attacker and you somehow come across a important system that doesn't have 2FA enabled, the first thing you're going to do is like some sort of credential stuffing attack, right? And so this is, I found a bunch of username and password pairs, and I'm just going to like test all of these. If it's more targeted, you're going to use like phishing. And one of the things that I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is some of like the security vendors that are of a little bit less repute, who are claiming attackers are using AI to make themselves more successful, right? Like everybody worry because the sky's falling down because now attackers have access to AI. The sad reality is that they do not need to use AI, right? They can just sell the phishing email with an Excel macro in it, compromise like a set of credentials, and like Bob's your uncle. And so like you don't need to use AI. And if there's one thing we know about like cyber attackers is that they will always take the path of least resistance. And so I don't believe, I haven't seen a single piece of evidence that suggests attackers are becoming more effective because of AI. And that's down to the fact that like phishing is still so effective and easy and so on.
But I feel like that's kind of a hot take because, like, everyone's talking about it, like, even from a phishing perspective, like, if you just have ChatGPT write the phishing email, like, maybe it gets clicked on with more frequency or something like that. Like, is it because it's still the same entry point that you're just kind of like, hey, listen, maybe it makes them like 10% better or something, but it's not like a meaningful step forward, or kind of how would you describe why AI isn't?
I think it comes down to what I was just saying, which is that like it doesn't need to be even 10% better,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
if you look at the financial losses and you look at the incidents that have occurred over the last 18 months, 2 years, AI didn't need to be involved. And so why would an attacker complicate the process when it was unnecessary? Now, maybe there's some script kiddies out there who are like playing around and using ChatGPT to make a phishing email seem more legitimate, or are, using AI to help do some research to make their BEC fraud a little bit more believable, but it's fractional. And it's certainly not the like, hey, you need to buy our firewall because all these attackers now have AI, which is what we're seeing in the market at the minute.
For sure, that has been Keanu Reeves has been telling us to do that actually. So,
yeah, there you go.
As we are talking about AI and agents, of course, like how do you see agents kind of working within the Tines platform? Because it seems like a lot of this automation could be something that an agent could take some data, spin up a pipeline, whatever. So, kind of talk through that.
So anytime we talk about this subject internally or with customers, the first question I ask is like, what do you mean by an agent? Because if there's one thing that's very unclear to me is like, there's just a blurriness around like the definitions of what's a co-pilot, what's an assistant, what's an agent. So just for my own sake, what do you consider an agent?
I think an agent is something that can autonomously act upon instructions and do research and reasoning to figure out what the next set of things that it should be doing is.
Awesome. So if an agent took action based on that definition in an audit log somewhere, it would have the agent rather than the person's name that built it or like somebody who was observing it happen.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's still a human in the loop that has to accept it, but yes, right. Hopefully.
Because I think that the litmus test that we use is around the identity, which I think is really important, right? And so if you're sitting at a keyboard and you're interacting with like ChatGPT, that's not an agent, right? That's an assistant, that's a co-pilot because you're the person in charge. But with an agent, to your point, it's acting autonomously. Sure, it can involve somebody else like a junior employee would, but the person taking the action is this agent and their name will appear based on their identity. Okay, so we're clear.
Yeah.
we can get back to your question. I think agents are going to be incredibly important in every single piece of enterprise software, including mission critical ones like security, IT, engineering, infrastructure, etc. I think that we're really excited about it, but we're also really cautious about it at the same time because these things are maybe 95% accurate today. Like being generous, they're like 95% accurate. And with cybersecurity, that's not good enough, right? Like that you can't respond correctly to an alert 95% of the time. And so I think what'll be really interesting to see is how do companies like ourselves start to introduce agents into these mission critical departments, but do it in such a way that it's transparent, it's auditable, it's governable, it's controllable, so that over time users can build trust in agents. And I think what a lot of companies have gotten wrong in this space so far is that they've tried to do too much too soon and given security teams a black box. And they said, here's your phishing agent, have at it. And that doesn't work for security, right? I need to be able to know what decisions it made, why it made them, what tools it has access to, what are the API calls that are being performed, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's kind of like the analogy we sometimes use internally is that of like autonomous driving, right? Like we all believe that there's a world where autonomous cars will exist and it'll be happier drivers, quicker journey, safer roads, etc. And maybe that technology exists today, but no way do I trust it enough to get into a car and drive from like New York to LA, right? I still need a steering wheel to be able to grab onto every now and again. So it's this kind of like, I think, incremental journey that we will go on over the next decade, which is like starting with lane assist that we have today and slowly building more and more technology and allowing more and more responsibility in the hands of these agents until eventually we're at this point where we have enough trust in the system to allow it complete control over things like security alerts.
That makes sense. Would you say though, like, so if you weren't touching an audit log then though, but you were just reading a phishing email and enacting a rule upon that, like that maybe has less weight to it than kind of touching the audit log? So like is something like it, do you think it gets introduced into maybe some of the less weightier things?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Okay. Like I think that's a really natural conclusion. Like let's start with the low risk stuff. The same you would do with like a junior employee, right? Yeah. Hey, look, I'm going to put you on the low level stuff first, etc. And so, even today, like we have Times customers that are doing this, where essentially they pick a large language model that we run in a secure and private way. They expose a bunch of deterministic workflows to this agent, and then they get to decide which alerts go there, what actions it can perform, et cetera, et cetera. So companies are already doing that, frankly, with great success.
Yeah. Well, when you moved out from this core security use case to now, you serve a number of different personas. I think it's like IT, DevOps, product teams, like a bunch of them. Each of those require different integrations. The terminology is different. Like I don't think a product person knows what a SOAR or whatever a SIM is, right? Yeah. And then probably the features also that they need are different. So like, how'd you go about that? Was it very much like, hey, this is the next persona we're going to target and we're going to build for them, and then the next, or kind of just walk us through that approach?
So I personally tend to think that every problem is a product problem. And if we're not growing fast enough, it's a product problem. If our customers are churning, it's a product problem. If the coffee in the office is shit, it's a product problem. I'm joking, but like you get
kind of is true, yeah.
Exactly. And so we always started with the product. And then we worried about go-to-market and product and packaging later. From day zero, we always had in our mind that we wanted the product to work for any use case, right? The problems that we were solving for security teams were too much work, too many fragmented systems, not enough staff. And so those were the problems that we set out to solve for security teams. And we were always really confident that we would be able to do that, right? Again, I'd done it for 15 years. I had a deep understanding and empathy for the problems. But we were trying to do it in such a way that we would solve for these specific use cases, but build a product in such a way that if our customers wanted to use it for IT straight away out the gate, they would be able to do that. Or if they wanted to use it for lead routing of marketing leads, they would be able to do it. And so we never spoke about it like externally or on our marketing site, but we had customers from the earliest days using the product outside security. Because again, like all we were doing, and I'm not being unfair to Times when I say this, all we were doing was taking data from someplace, manipulating it in some way, and putting it somewhere else. And we built the product in such a way that we would never be the bottleneck for things like integrations, or we would never be a bottleneck if they wanted to use the product for, infrastructure or DNS management in AWS. And so, instead of us solving for phishing use case or a, Tenable use case or a CrowdStrike use case, we built this extraordinarily flexible Turing complete programming language, taught our customers how to use it, and then let them go and solve the problems that they were experiencing themselves. And they were often, quote unquote, SOAR use cases, but they were often like non-SOAR use cases like application security or vuln management or onboarding and offboarding, or even we had people use like build workflows and Times to open their garage doors, right? The product was that flexible to allow them to do that. And then, Shavik, it just became a question of like, okay, now that we have all this amazing organic traction in these areas, it just became a matter of timing and execution. Okay, like what's the right time to start telling the world that we can help them with their IT workflows? And how do we charge for that? And what's the first call sales deck need to look like for that? And so, although we had all this early traction, it's only in the last couple of years that we felt the timing was right and we had enough kind of experience and credibility to go and be able to do justice for those class of customers.
Yeah, it was funny because as I was preparing for this podcast, right, I was looking at the website and I was like, whoa, like this is like the Tines I knew. This is
Sure.
very different. And one might say that, like you had mentioned, you evaluate Zapier and if this and that and like kind of those solutions, but like it almost is like you've gone from where people would traditionally say like, hey, are we using Demisto? Are we using this? Are we using that? But now it's like, no, you are just, if you want a workflow builder, you are one of the solutions that is there. I guess like what's been exciting about that? What's been challenging about that? Because I it seems like you have a much broader persona base, so it almost might be like a little bit more dilutive to like try and get people to just think of you as a general workflow builder.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and that's one of the thrilling parts is trying to figure that out. Like, and how do we tell that story? Because it's not common, as you know, for a product to start in the SOC and go enterprise wide. Like that is not a playbook that really exists. And so it's been really fun to kind of like invent that messaging and that playbook. I think the thing that gives us a lot of confidence is if you believe that a category of software should exist, which is essentially an enterprise-wide automation layer that allows every team to standardize on a single platform to build, run, and monitor their workflows, which seems like sensible thing to me, right? If you're a CIO, you're buying security automation, legal automation, marketing automation, HR automation, IT automation, and as well as that just being a bad way to allocate capital, you're creating all these silos around your organization. And it'd be as if every team was using a different type of spreadsheet software, right? It'd be chaos. And so if that category of software should exist, what does it look like? What characteristics should it have? And for me, I think the three things are that it needs to be exceptionally flexible, right? It needs to be able to handle every type of use case. The second thing is that it needs to be extraordinarily easy to use. So this has to be workable for both like hardcore engineers, but also people who have no technical background, who just need to go and solve a business logic problem. And then the third thing is it needs to be reliable and trustworthy and secure. And so, what gives us a lot of confidence is that we've done this in the most mission critical environments, from large banks to pharmaceuticals to public and private SaaS companies. We're doing 1 billion automated actions on behalf of our customers every single week. So we know we can do the security and privacy stuff. Then the usability stuff, again, we've got hundreds of users who are highly engaged in the product, who love it, who are building incredibly intricate and granular and mission critical workflows, but have no background in software engineering. They're just system thinkers. So you get the usability part. And then we have the flexibility piece, right? So by starting with building this general workflow that would just treat every product the exact same way, we can do that as well. And so we believe if there's going to be a company who creates this enterprise-wide category of software, we have every possible component within the product today. And so it's just, to your point, a matter of how do we tell this story to the right persona? And how do we figure out, how to tell a story to the security team that resonates, and then tell a security to a finance team that resonates. And so that's the kind of like the fun, but also devilishly hard challenges that we're dealing with today.
So I want to move. We talked about agents, but I want to talk about just AI broadly, right? Sure. So LLMs came out, right? In your backyard, Intercom was one of the earliest people to ship Fin and start to experiment with it. So it was something you were clearly seeing. What, like, since Since ChatGPT was launched and everything like that, like how have you changed the product to incorporate AI?
I love this question because it's where I kind of get to embarrass myself a little bit. So, when LLMs first began to enter the public consciousness, like a little over 2 years ago now, I guess, I was so skeptical. Like I was just like, nah, this isn't going to work. Like, I've seen vendors promise AI for 20
Yep.
years,
Yep.
like this is going to be trash. And I kind of discounted it a little bit. But then, as soon as I got my hands on the product and as soon as a company began to explore it, we pretty quickly realized, oh no, hang on, this is different, right? This is going to be the single most important technology change of the decade. But it took us a good year, at least, to figure out how we could include it in the product in a way that wasn't some marketing checkbox or, some lip service to satisfy a board director at somewhere, right? And what we eventually realized was for our customers and our users, what really matters to them is they want to use these LLMs, but security and privacy is a fundamental non-negotiable. And so we had to figure out a way to leverage these frontier models in a way that didn't add any new sub processors, that didn't involve fine tuning, logging, training, etc. So our first product that we released was that. It was kind of like an under the hood, really boring infrastructure thing that essentially let our customers leverage these LLMs in a secure and private way. And so that, we could then build on top of that and release all these other new features. And then we started to explore things like very natural things like, okay, I'm going to make data transformation orders of magnitude easier by providing a natural language interface. And so instead of our customers having to define the schema or the transformations that they needed, they could just describe it in natural language and the secure and private LLM would write some code that would allow it to happen. And so those transformations made the product so much easier to use and it allowed them to build better workflows. The second thing we released then was what we call the AI action. And the AI action is essentially a way for our customers to get access to an LLM and use it in any workflow at any point. And so instead of them having to build this complex logic to make a decision, they can just use the AI action. So back to our phishing example, one of our customers, a large pharmaceutical, is essentially doing BEC fraud or CEO fraud detection using our AI action. So they're saying, hey, does this email look like a scam? Or is this trying to impersonate an executive at the company? And it just works incredibly well for those type of use cases. It also allows our customers to do cool things like essentially check every single change that's made to a code base for security vulnerabilities. So instead of having to buy a dedicated product to do vulnerability scanning in real time on code, they can just build a Tines workflow to do that with the AI action. And so we released these initial AI features that were very much designed for building better workflows and running better workflows. And we saw the adoption of them give us a lot of confidence, right? We had 2/3 of our customers using these AI capabilities in a matter of months, which, as you know, is fairly rare in this AI space. And that was unlocked largely by the security and privacy piece. And so once we had this capability, we started to ask our customers, hey, what else would you like us to do? Or what else could we do with these AI features? And frankly, why aren't you using AI more, right? We all agree it's this transformational technology, but why aren't you using it more in your day-to-day? And what we heard was 2 reasons repeatedly. The first was that, look, these AI LLMs are incredible, but they have no access to my real-time or proprietary information. And even if they did, I don't have the time, the energy to go through some clunky, regular fine-tuning process. And I don't have the resources to do it anyway. That's the first problem. And the second problem gets to our point earlier on. Look, these models are amazing, but they can't take action on my behalf. And even if they could, I wouldn't trust them to do it because they're non-deterministic. I can't predict how it's going to react, what it's going to do, what tool it's going to call, et cetera, et cetera. And so we fairly quickly realized, wow, geez, workflows is the perfect answer to both these problems, right? Workflows essentially give you real-time access to any tool. And we've spent 7 years building tens of thousands of integrations that allow you to connect to any system, any data source, in any environment, cloud, hybrid, on-prem, in real time. And so we were like, okay, well, that's workflows is an answer to that problem. And then the problem around taking action and non-determinism, well, hell, workflows are a great answer to that as well, because I can predict exactly how this workflow is going to perform. I can decide what credentials it's going to use, who should have access to it, how it should run, what happens if there's an error, et cetera, et cetera. So we went from this world of, again, in the last kind of like nine months, this world of workflows being an important part of everybody's technology stack to kind of being the key ingredient to every enterprise technology strategy for the next 3 to 5 years, because they're going to be the answer to how do I get value from these LLMs in a real world business setting. And so we've seen our growth accelerate really, really quickly as a result of customers beginning to use Tines as the glue between their existing enterprise technology investments and these frontier LLMs. So it's an incredibly exciting development, and we're continuing to kind of have our minds blown as customers begin to use workflows in this way.
In that sense, though, are you seeing, like, for example, Claude is better at or I shouldn't say better, but I think it's better for many coding tasks, right? Versus OpenAI is probably better for writing or synthesizing different information or stuff. Like, is that something that you are making opinionated sort of model choices for your customers, or is it just kind of like, hey, whatever one you're using, you can use on our platform because we're super horizontal and flexible?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. So our default, so when you run Tines AI features in default mode, we're running Claude in your tenant. And so all those features are powered by Claude Sonnet 3.5 now, I think. However, we also provide a way for our customers to use any model of their choice. And so if you've trained your own model, you can use that. If you have an OpenAI enterprise license, you can use that. And so one of the exciting things about this is we've kind of like betted on all these models, not consolidating by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly the value and the cost of them coming down. And then our customers will be able to choose what the right model is for the particular use case. And we can, of course, help them with that. But one of the things that we feel strongly about is the value that we're adding isn't going to be, we're not going to build an LLM. So we're not some research lab who's going to build an LLM and train it and fine tune it. We're just going to do everything else, right? So we'll provide the connectivity, the audit logs, the role-based access control, the scalability, the security, all that kind of stuff. And then our customers will be able to decide what's the right model for the particular task they're trying to solve.
At some point, I'm going to be very excited for when we have the identity layer being like, this is Agent Fred and this is Agent Sally, and like that. That'll be a fun way to do it.
Do you think there's a world where these agents will have names, like as in like, hey, this is Bob and this is Karen, the security analyst? I really hope not, because that just like the emasculation of like these agents creeps me out a little bit.
We're seeing some folks start to have personalities and names behind the agents, and it is really funny, right? To just have like the SOC analyst like be very opinionated about certain things. But we'll see how that evolves. But the final question from me before we wrap things up is basically just Tines has this kind of drag and drop workflow builder, right? And that served you obviously very well to get to this point. That being said, you just talked about how people can use natural language and stuff like that. So how do you think about like kind of this UI in the AI world? Like, is it interchangeable between, hey, you can choose the natural language interface or the workflow drag and drop builder? Or how are you kind of thinking about that?
Yeah, I think it's one of the It's one of the most enjoyable debates we're having internally at the minute. I think one thing we're very proud of is that our mission is to power the world's most important workflows. And we've always been exceptionally flexible around the technology we use to achieve that mission. And so if, as we call it, like our storyboard, which is the drag and drop canvas, if that is no longer the most effective way for our customers to achieve that mission, we will have no qualms about like sunsetting that or replacing with something better. Today, our current thinking is that they will work in harmony together. So in the short to medium term, we believe that one of our differentiated value adds is that you can build deterministic workflows with a drag and drop interface to choose the right technologies and tools, and then expose them to a large language model. So you can say, hey, look, here's the exact way that I want you to quarantine a device, and then expose that to the large language model. So an agent, if it thinks that the right thing to do is to quarantine a device, you have created this deterministic way of achieving it. And so you have a lot of ability to trust that the agent is going to do the right thing when it comes to taking action. And I think that's the way it will work in the short to medium term. Now, these things are accelerating at a mind-blowing rate. And so maybe before long, the agents and the LLMs will actually be able to build a better quarantine device workflow than I could, or than you could, or a security analyst could. But today, we're a ways off that, like a ways off that.
That's pretty cool, though. So you basically have these recipes for, like, are those something that you expose for the customers of like, hey, these are recipes that, you can kind of, almost like templates for these things that,
okay. So we call them stories. And essentially that's how all our AI essentially works today. So you have these large language models and you expose a set of stories to the large language model. And so you essentially tell the large language model, hey, if you were asked to look up a user, here's the workflow that should do it. Mm-hmm. If you were asked to quarantine a device, here's the workflow that should do it. If you're asked to open the garage door, here's the workflow that should do it. And so it's combining what we do best at Times, which again is connectivity, ease of use, workflow creation, which with what large language models do best, which is like understanding of instructions, deciding what the right tool to use at the right time is. And so I think one of the reasons our customers have been so successful with our AI products is that we're not trying to do something that's outside our lane, and we're not trying to use LLMs in a way that they're not really designed to be used.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Owen, this was a ton of fun and also just really cool to see how things have evolved from the early days when I would pay attention to Tides and how it was going to now.
Wait a second, you're no longer paying attention to Tides?
Well, no, I'm still paying attention to Tides, obviously, but I'm just saying, like, from the earliest days of the security workflows to now, it's really cool to see. So, but I guess, like, before we wrap, anything that you'd like to end about Tides or just talk about that's coming up?
We're going to release 250 features this year. And so the one thing I would encourage any listeners to do is check back often, because as you know, the product changes quite a bit and the functionality improves on a daily basis. So check back, stay in tune, continue to follow all our socials. And we're also going to do a bunch of hiring this year. So we'll add 100 people to this incredible team that we already have in place. So if folks are thinking about taking a step or moving in a different career direction, at times.com/careers.
That's awesome. And I'm sure, given what you guys are building, there's going to be a lot of people are excited about. So, Owen, thanks for the time, and good luck with the 250 features this year. And to the team, sounds like an ambitious target. So I'm rooting for you guys.
I appreciate it, man. Take care.